Shall we move on to our main topic, Dave?
Yeah, so Rob, do you want to take us through the premise of this topic? Because you've done a bit of the groundwork on this one, and we did set some rules up for ourselves.
Yeah, we did. And I guess to come at this from the top, we are two old school fans, Dave, and we lapse into talking about old school Doctor Who probably a little more than New Who, especially when New Who's not been around for the past 12 months on our screens. And I thought, you know what, I think we should swing the pendulum back a bit and talk about some New Who and the top 5 things we liked, maybe a few runners-up. And I did sketch out some ground rules and send them to you the other day, and you graciously acquiesced to them. The rules for our top 5 New Who things, as I'll call it, they're not moments, they're not people particularly, they're just things, they could be moments or people, are that all doctors and showrunners are immediately exonerated from this list. We're not going to waste, I say waste in quotation marks, one of our top 5 things on Russell T Davies, for example.
Yeah, or Peter Capaldi.
Yeah, exactly.
We know that the doctors were great. We know the showrunners were great. We've devoted a lot of time to talk about how great those big names are. So let's take them as read.
Exactly. And so you and I, Dave, are going to tic-tac back and forth, presenting our items in as chronological an order as we can muster. So if I have a season or a series 1 thing on my list, that's what I'm going to present first, no matter what. And we can have up to 5 runners-up. I think in the end I've picked 3, and you have picked...
3 as well.
3 as well, great. And we'll see where we go from there. This is quite exciting because I have no idea what you've picked outside of the series that your picks come from.
No, that's right. So just before we recorded, we exchanged what series our picks were from so we could put them into some sort of a chronological order. And there are a couple where we've both got a pick in the same series, and most of them we haven't. So there aren't that many chances for us to overlap. What I've done, Rob, is I've picked a moment or a story, but used that as an example to then branch off and talk about something bigger that I really like about the new series. So that's how I'm playing it. But we both picked something from series 1, and just because I know the best way to make this tic-tacking work, I'll ask you to go first, Rob.
Okay, Dave. I've picked a scene from Rose. We got any snaps there?
No, but I like where you're going.
Okay. I've picked the scene where Chris Eccleston is talking to Billie Piper as Rose and talking about the turn of the Earth and being able to feel it. I picked this because this has always struck me as almost a modern take on, I'm a Time Lord, you don't understand the implications, I'm not a human being, I walk in eternity, from Pyramids of Mars.
Yeah.
In the sense that the Doctor is talking to a companion as the audience surrogate, telling us that he's different. But this is couched in language that I think is a lot more humble. It's about him noticing the small stuff. And he's also talking about our world, not the whole universe or indeed eternity. And doesn't the Earth seem extraordinary when he puts it in those terms about, how we're spinning around and we're falling through space, clinging to the skin of this little tiny world? It's like Monty Python's Galaxy Song.
Yes.
The first time I heard that as a kid, it just blew my mind, all these facts about the universe. And I was like, is this true? I guess it's true. Oh my God, the universe is amazing. But getting back to Rose, I saw this scene the first time and also thought, that's bloody amazing. I really like this New Who.
I can remember when we first watched with a bunch of friends that leaked copy of Rose in somebody's living room. For the first 10, 15 minutes, I'm going, yeah, this is good. But that was the moment I thought, this is Doctor Who.
And, compared to the next 4 things I talk about, my runners-up, I guess, in some ways this scene doesn't really compare to them. The next few scenes are bigger, broader, whatever. But this is sentimental to me. It's the first glimpse of New Who I had, and it's still very good regardless.
The other thing that scene does is, for those people who came at Doctor Who and didn't know who Russell T Davies was and what he could do, this was a moment where you go, this guy is a very lyrical writer, and he can write in that very modern lyrical sort of way. I was certainly familiar with Russell's work from Queer as Folk earlier, and that very clever lyrical writing that he does in all his stuff. But yeah, this is, I think, the moment for a lot of fans. They've gone, this guy can write, like really write.
Yeah, you say lyrical, I would say poetic. They mean the same thing. It's just really good.
Yeah, it is. So my first pick is also from Series 1, and probably equally obvious, I think, and that is I've picked the episode Dalek. Now, Rob, I've picked this episode not just because it was the episode that convinced me that this was going to be a show I was going to follow, but because it's representative of the fact that I think one of the best things that the new series of Doctor Who has done well, almost consistently, is the Daleks. The modern take on the Daleks, to me, has been one of the most wonderful things about the series, one of my favourite things about the series. There are so many good Dalek episodes, but particularly Dalek itself, where they just take all the technology and all the things that we've learned and all the things that television could do and suddenly take a 1963 created monster and just make it work for modern television without any hesitation whatsoever. And it's just so good. And the way the Doctor and Rose interact with it and the way that it goes on, and then all the Dalek stuff that it creates from there and the mythos that it creates from there. I think the Daleks are one of the best parts of new Doctor Who, and that's my first pick.
Oh, fantastic pick, fantastic episode. It's funny, I was only today at work, I was talking to someone about Dalek, the episode Dalek, in terms of, we had some repairmen in our bathroom at work, the floor was wet, and they were turning the electricity off so they didn't get zapped, and I was talking to someone about how the Dalek zaps the people with the sprinkler system on. So that's just really weird that that's come up twice in one day for me. But yeah, completely concur with that. It's a wonderful scene, wonderful story.
Yeah, and a wonderful use of a classic monster. Rob, you picked something out of Series 2.
I have, Dave, and I don't think you have anything from Series 2.
No, so there's no chance of a clash here.
Yeah. Dave, I've gone with Sarah Jane returning in School Reunion.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
Now, I don't have a particular clip to play here. I just want to say it was mind-blowing, really, to have Sarah Jane return and come face to face with the 10th Doctor. And I think the way he plays it, his performance, the way he looks at her, I think Tennant, being such a big fan of the show, knows exactly what the Doctor has to do here, and he does it. And there's a real bittersweet sort of melancholy about them being back together, and of course Rose being the latest in a long line. And it's not the last time that will be a thing in the show, basically how painful it is to be left behind by the Doctor. But also how hard it is for the Doctor to leave people too. There's just a lot going on, and it's really nice. Then you throw in K9 having this heroic death, and I don't even like K9, but I love that scene. The only unfortunate thing, though, is the overall story of School Reunion isn't that fabulous. You have all these amazing scenes and great performances, but they're ultimately in this mediocre story. It doesn't stop them being great moments. I'll stop and stare at the TV anytime this is on. It's just amazing. But it is a bit of a mediocre story. But forget that. Sarah Jane returned to Doctor Who. It was great. The end.
It really was. That was an episode I remember my friends and I were just, it was on the calendar, that's the day that Sarah Jane is going to be on. That's the day her episode's on, clear the calendar sort of thing. And it was the moment where, having established the new series in Series 1 and said, look, this works. Not just works, this is really, really good television. It's really good Doctor Who. Having stood on its own 2 feet, they're now bringing in that gentle, wonderful aspect of the old series and going, yes, we're standing on our own 2 feet, but we are part of a bigger thing, we are part of a bigger canon, and we are connecting ourselves to that in a most wonderful way. And I think that's a really good pick.
Yeah, thank you. What have you got?
So I've got something which I've said from Series 3, but again, it's representative of something a bit bigger. Now, I've used Series 3 because my favourite story of the new series is Human Nature. Now, I'm not just picking Human Nature though, Rob. I am picking this to represent a vast number of the Russell T Davies 2-parters, which I think are amongst some of the classic stories of all of Doctor Who. I'm talking about Empty Child Doctor Dances, Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways, The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, Human Nature and Family of Blood, of course. I would put the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky in there. I would definitely put Stolen Earth and Journey's End in there. These big, epic Russell T Davies era 2-parters, I think, is just Doctor Who at its best. They compete with all my favourites from the classic series, and so I've picked those as being my next favourite thing about new Doctor Who.
Yeah, look, wonderful story, and I was really kicking around some scenes from that myself. If I did pick a scene, it would have been at the end where, the Doctor is fire and ice and sugar and spice or whatever it is, and he locks people away in neutron stars and all of that sort of stuff. I really do enjoy that bit from the end, but the whole thing is just wonderful. And yes, his two-parters, Russell's two-parters across his era, are just amazing. If only we can hope Chris Chibnall's first two-parter kicking off this new series is as good. That could be very exciting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst I totally understand and respect the argument that in modern television, stories are 42 minutes long and the audience expects to have, for the most part, a story over and done within a night, where they do the two-parters, they really make use of them and just do a really good story with that extra bit of depth, that extra bit of excitement, more time for more drama. And yeah, I think they're really, really good.
And they're quite different to the Moffat two-parters too, where his raison d'etre was almost, let's do the first part, and in the second part we'll try and just go somewhere completely different and do different things. And I think, no, just continue the story on like the Russell T Davies ones did, Yeah. Sometimes the Moffat two-parters were a bit weird like that.
And once again, I get why people like that, but I love the bigger scale Russell T Davies ones. They're a big part of what I love about New Who.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now, we're tic-tacking, and so, Rob, you can go next, but we have both picked something out of Series 5.
Ooh, Smithy's first series, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay. Mine comes from the end of Smithy's first series. Am I warm?
Yes.
From the Big Bang?
No.
Oh, good. Okay, great. We're in the Big Bang, Dave, and Smithy has got young Amelia Pond home in bed. The crack is sealing up on her wall. And he does this lovely monologue to her. You know the one, when you wake up, I'll be a story in your head. We're all stories in the end. Series 5 just had this dreamy fairy tale feel in many places, and this speech towards the end, referring to himself as a story. I mean, it's meta, but there's this broader, almost beautiful way that we all pass on eventually, and we do become stories because people remember us and talk about us. We become stories. We really do. It's quite profound when you stop and think about it. And I think Smith's acting as well, his performance, is just sublime in this scene. I mean, this is his first series, and he's just bashing it out of the park. It's amazing. I love this monologue.
Yeah, it's really good. When you said you were picking something from the end, I thought for a moment you were going to do that lovely bit of time travel stuff where Smith's going back and forth and bringing the mop forward and the hat forward and changing this and changing that, and that really sort of clever, funny thing. Which that's the standout memory I have from that two-parter. But no, you've picked a really nice point there.
Yeah, thank you. It's a quiet little speech. A lot of the Doctor speeches are big and bombastic. This is a quieter one, and it's just it's gorgeous.
Speaking of quiet and gorgeous speeches, Bill Nye giving that wonderful monologue at the end of my favourite scene in my favourite story from the Matt Smith era, which is Vincent and the Doctor. I've picked this not just because it's a wonderful story with just emotion and depth and all the rest of it, but representative of what it says about the show, that here we have an episode of Doctor Who, this funny little show, Rob, that you and I love and others listening love, and how many podcasts are there and how many websites are there and how much devotion does this silly little show get? And in it we had Richard Curtis writing and Bill Nye performing.
Yeah, that's outrageous.
It's just incredible. And I just wanted to pick this, as I said, because it's not just a great episode, but it just shows what a big deal this show is, that it can attract Richard Curtis and Bill Nye. Bill Nye. I still remember the first time I saw that episode, I had no idea he was coming, and suddenly he turns around like, oh my God, they got Bill Nye on Doctor. Wow.
Yeah.
And so this is representative of all those great, famous, established writers and actors that the new series has had. This is my favourite example of them. I think it's a wonderful episode, wonderful example, but we've had so many good writers and actors in the new series, and that's one of my favourite things about it. It's just so much talent.
Yeah, and a nice tie back to the start of this episode. We're talking about writers who don't write sci-fi. There's the example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned in that discussion Douglas Adams, and that's one of those things where, I'm sometimes, irrationally proud to go, just I don't know if you realise, but Douglas Adams wrote 3 Doctor Who stories. Yep, that Douglas Adams.
And script edited.
Yeah. And the ability to say Richard Curtis wrote for this show, I think that's just a great, wonderful thing.
Oh, yeah, Richard Curtis, Neil Gaiman, some wonderful writers.
Absolutely. Now, Rob, we can't tic-tac for a little bit because you've got 2 picks and I've got 2 picks, and neither of your next 2 picks are actually from a series.
No, they're not, Dave. They're from the 2013 specials, which fall between Series 7 and Series 8. So, yeah, I'm going to get 2 bites at the cherry here. Once from Day of the Doctor and once from Time of the Doctor. I think that's no surprise because they're the 2 specials from 2013. And I'm going to go with Day of the Doctor first. The scene, Dave, is Tom Baker as the curator.
It's not a snap for me, but it is on my list of honourable mentions, so it's a half a snap.
Now, Dave, was this a cheat for me to get Tom Baker into this list, even though we're talking New Who? Honestly, no, it wasn't. I just think this is a great scene. You watch the facial expressions of Smith when he hears the voice first, then he sees Tom, and you listen to the music that's playing throughout. You think of the ramifications of it all, that the Doctor is going to have a very long life ahead of himself. He's going to cycle through some old personas again, then grow very old with this one. He ends up curating a museum. It's really beautiful. It's a great thought to have about the future of the show, even if it's just a thought in our heads. You know, the show might not get made in 10 years' time, but we can always have this thought. And it's just this amazing cherry on the top for the 50th that they got Tom bloody Baker back and just did this beautiful scene, and it still made sense, even though he didn't look like the Doctor anymore. Smith acted really well against him. Oh, just great stuff.
It really is, and you've mentioned basically the 2 things that I would have said about it, Rob. One is that as an old school fan, the moment when you hear Tom Baker's voice and you just, oh my God, Tom Baker's in this. Like, I can remember sitting in the cinema watching this thing and having really enjoyed it, and the big epic finale and everything, and it's just winding down nicely, and suddenly Tom Baker's there, and you're just like, wow, this is wonderful, this is amazing. But as you also said, it's about this idea that there is a longevity to this show and to this character, and it just says, you know what, whatever happens, whatever twists and turns there might be, will be here in the future. It is so lovely.
Yeah, just fantastic writing from Stephen Moffat here. Amazing.
Yeah, very much so.
All right, this next one is my final one, obviously, before I get to my runners-up. It's a longish one because I want to compare it to a bunch of things. It'll all make sense in a moment. It's Matt Smith regenerating in the Time of the Doctor, Dave.
Okay, not one that would have occurred to me. So what's you thinking?
Well, I think this regeneration has a great build-up. Even Amy arriving to cut Clara's grass essentially works when she appears and starts, interacting with the Smith Doctor who's regenerating and giving this little speech. Then his bow tie hits the ground. It's just so good, isn't it? I mean, it all starts with, it all just disappears, doesn't it? Everything you are gone in a moment, like breath on a mirror.
That is a really lovely monologue, isn't it?
It really is. And what I want to do, what this longer segment here is I want to compare it to the other 3 New Who regenerations, not including the War Doctor, because I think it's the best. I mean, Eccleston's is a good regeneration. It's a bit brief. I think his better speech was earlier in the same episode when he comes on as that emergency hologram and says, Rose, I'm sending you home. Have a good life for me and all that. I think that's actually his best speech. The actual regeneration speech where he's being a bit goofy and, I might have 2 heads, I might have no head. It's good, but it's not a great regeneration speech. It's not as good as the Smithy one.
I've got to say the Eccleston one edges Smithy out for me. You were fantastic. You were absolutely fantastic. And you know what? So was I. I love that moment. I really do.
Oh, Dave, it is great, but it doesn't nudge Smithy for me.
No, fair enough. Different opinions. That's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Tennant's, to me, is a bit like Eccleston insofar as he has this major speech a little earlier in the episode. It's the one where he's railing against the dying of the light and saying it's so unfair. And it's a bit petulant, but I think anyone in that situation who wants to keep living would no doubt feel similar. But in the end, when we finally get to his regeneration, we now get the greatly mocked line, and I don't think Tennant even liked it particularly, I don't want to go. And yeah. I didn't think that was very good at all.
No.
And then Capaldi's Gosh, again, we've spoken about this on the show. Capaldi's regeneration should have happened in the previous story when he had these great lines and he was lying on the ground wishing there were stars and all that sort of stuff. And I think that was just wonderful. Instead, Capaldi gets this almost cloying sort of speech where it's clearly trying to outdo the Smith one, and it just gets stuck in treacle, like, hate is always foolish and love is always wise, and
it's trying too hard, isn't it?
Yeah, and you mustn't tell anyone your name. No one would understand it except children. Children can hear it. And I'm like, oh, God, good grief. So of all of them, I think Smith's regeneration, and I take on board what you say about Eccleston, but I think Smith's regeneration speech just knocks the others for 6.
Well, they're your top 5 things in the new series, Robin. If that's one of your picks, then that's great. I totally understand where you're coming from. And hearing that speech back again, I was reminded of how nice it was.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll always remember when the doctor was me. Oh, Dave. Straight through the heart.
No, that's good. So look, they're your 5 pick, Robbers. I've still got 2 to go. The next one I have is from Series 10, and this is Pearl Mackie as Bill. One of the things about the new series that hasn't really landed that much for me are the companions. I loved Rose in Series 1, went off her very much in Series 2. Really like Martha. I know this is a bit of a heresy nowadays, but Catherine Tate never worked for me. Donna did a bit, but Catherine Tate just never did. I actively disliked Amy and Clara, and I've spoken about that in the past. But then along comes Bill, and this is just everything I want in a Doctor Who companion. Someone who's young, exciting, got character, got a bit of spunk, and just wants to have exciting adventures with the Doctor. Like I want to have exciting adventures with the Doctor. And her enthusiasm and her simplicity and her infectious good nature was just so wonderful and helped me enjoy that series so much. Series 10, I've said it many times, is one of my 2 real favourites out of the new series, the other being Series 1. So look, I'm just going to play a clip here of that moment when Pearl Mackie, I think, officially becomes a companion. So that Rob, to me, is the moment she becomes a companion. She is my favourite companion of the new series. She is a highlight of the new series for me, the character of Bill, played by Pearl Mackie.
Yeah, I had a sense I'd like the companion, Dave. I was still subscribing to Dwim at the time. There was some good lead up to Pearl joining the show. I like the look of the companion. I like the idea of the companion that we'd been told about. And that scene, yeah, that really did seal it for me too. It was like, great, I do like this companion. It was just natural.
I think it meant a lot to me as well because, I don't like it when I don't like something in Doctor Who. If I'm not enjoying a series or I'm not enjoying a companion, I don't like that. I want to be positive. And having been, frankly, very down on a couple of companions for a few years now, to have someone I love so much come on it meant even more to me. It was really good. It was so wonderful. And she's, I think, the only new series companion proper that I've met. And that was pretty cool too. I haven't met any of the others, so I have met Pearl Mackie, and that was kind of cool.
Very good. What's your next one?
So my next one and my final pick is from Series 11, and I've picked the episode Demons of the Punjab.
Ooh.
And I've picked this to represent the historicals, because one thing the new series has done really well is that it has remembered that Doctor Who can travel backwards in time as well as forwards in time. Something that, particularly in the JNT era, they kind of forgot a lot. And the fact they've done it so well, Fires of Pompeii, Shakespeare Code, lots of good examples right across the various different eras. But Chibnall did it so well. Rosa, Dems of the Punjab, and the one with James the First, and the Witchfinders. Those 3 were 3 of my favourite episodes in that series. So well done. And so, yeah, my 5th favourite thing out of the new series is that they've done historical stories so well. And, look, I've said this before on the podcast, but if there's a kid out there who watches an historical episode about Pompeii or about the partition of India or about James I and then goes onto Wikipedia and reads more about that piece of history or goes and buys a book or branches off. That's a wonderful thing, and I think that's Doctor Who at its absolute best.
Yeah, completely agree with you. As a history buff myself, I think it was one of the shining lights of that first Chibnall series. I mean, there were things we criticised about that series, but I think one thing we really liked was the historical stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, summary from me, my top 5 favourite things: Daleks, Russell's two-parters, amazing guest cast and actors, Pearl Mackie, and historicals.
And for me, Eccleston's speech in Rose describing who he is as the Doctor, Sarah Jane returning in school reunion, were all stories in the end from the Big Bang, Tom Baker's cameo in Day of the Doctor, and Matt Smith's regeneration speech in The Time of the Doctor.
Some pretty good stuff there. It's a pretty good series, isn't it?
It really is. Now, I do have 3 runners-up, and it sounds like you do too, Dave. Mine are in no particular order, though.
Yeah, so look, you have taken one of my 3, so I'm going to sub one in, and I've still got 3.
Okay, Dave, I'm throwing in here, and you know I've... This is funny, because I've done Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor. I'm going for the trifecta with Night of the Doctor. Do I get a snap?
No, but... Oh! Yeah, no, very cool. Very, very cool. Very cool.
I could go on at length, Dave, about how Paul McGann should be what we know as the War Doctor. And the painful thing is, Night of the Doctor only serves to hammer that point home. Obviously, I think his Big Finish work had kept him in match fitness. The way he just strolls back in and inhabits this role, a role he'd barely played in front of the cameras at all.
Yeah.
It's just criminal how good he was. This is such a great Doctor Who moment. I think we all wanted a Paul McGann series after this, no matter how much we liked Matt Smith. Just, fantastic.
And it wasn't leaked.
No! Amazing.
It was a genuine surprise. You know, I am the Doctor, maybe not the one you expected. Wow, that was such a great moment.
Yeah, really good.
I have picked as one of my runners-up the I'd hope there'll be stars moment from the end of Capaldi's run, which you mentioned in passing, Rob. It should have been the regeneration moment, even though it's not. It's such a wonderful moment for me, and yeah, it deserves to be in my runners-up.
Yeah, I think, although we've never had confirmation, I'm sure that's what Moffat wrote it as, and then had to go and write the Christmas episode, and so it didn't become the regeneration moment.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, my second of 3 runners-up, Dave, is Blink.
Yeah, good. No, but good call.
Blink. I mean, Blink is almost cliche now to me, which is why I couldn't actually put it in my top 5. It's like an album that's become so good and so popular, it's become hard to listen to. You know, it's like Park Life by Blur, or What's the Story, Morning Glory by Oasis. It's just too big, too popular to be really cool, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
But like those albums, even though you slightly shudder when you think, oh, should I put this on? There's a reason why those albums are so loved. It's because they're good. And Blink is really, really good. The first time I saw it, I was blown away. And although the Weeping Angels become sort of a diminishing return as they go on in the series, this first episode was extraordinary. I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah, it's not Blink's fault that both the timey-wimey concept and the Angels concepts kind of got used to death and diminished over time. Who cares? That's not Blink's fault. Blink stands out as a really good piece of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
My next one, I've picked a pair of stories which I'm just a very big fan of, and that's Midnight and Turn Left. I think they go together as a pair because it's the Doctor light and Companion light. In this occasion, no big sort of metaphorical meaning or no representative thing, just 2 great stories as a pair that I really love.
Of the 2, do you have a favourite? For me, it'd be Turn Left.
Probably for me as well, although certainly at the time it was Turn Left, but I think Midnight has aged incredibly well, and so it's very hard to pick now, but yeah, probably just Turn Left.
Is that because it's simple? Like they're just on that ship for most of it?
Yeah, and because there are performances in there, particularly from Tennant, that every time you watch it, you get a little bit more of what they're doing, and they're really, really, really good. Whereas Turn Left perhaps relies a little bit, as drama should, on the impact. Oh my god, that's happened. Oh my god, that's happened. Like, you know, you can only ever get that once out of a drama. Whereas I think Midnight you can get more out of the follow-up watchings. But look, both great stories, both highlights of the new series.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, my third runner-up, Dave, Doomsday. And I think from the moment Rose said at the start of the story that this is how she died, this episode had me gripped on the first viewing. And so much of it now seems cheesy when I watch it, but on that first viewing, the Doctor and Rose eventually being separated, which at the time seemed very, very odd for Doctor Who, especially given the way Tennant and Rose had been unstoppable for this past season, and their hubris was just out of control, and, you know, suddenly they were separated literally, and this bass line kicked in and this music, and I thought, this is extraordinary. This is so different for Doctor Who. Of course, it all changes later on, but at this moment on transmission, it was a really big moment for me. And although I feel different about the story now, I can still sort of put myself back in that mindset of when I first saw it, and it's still extraordinary to me.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear that, Rob. I don't agree at all. I didn't really get a lot out of it when I first watched it. I was so annoyed and irritated by that whole smug Rose Doctor thing in Series 2 that by the time she's doing this very self-righteous thing, this is the day I died, I'm like, I'll just get on with it.
Oh, really?
I really, really got very angry at the Rose portrayal in Series 2, so her leaving the series wasn't a big deal for me. It was actually something I was kind of embracing. So I love the way that you describe it, and I love the way that it landed for you. It didn't land for me like that.
Okay.
And my final runner-up, Rob, is a moment that is also a representative moment. It's something that you almost mentioned before when you're talking about Tennant's regeneration. And whilst I think that a lot of that regeneration build-up and stuff is very schmaltzy, and some of it's actually a bit off, the moment where he sees Jack and Midshipman Frame in the bar and just gives Jack approval to move on with his life after what happened in Children of Earth, I just found that a really lovely and touching moment. And as a bigger representative thing, obviously this is a portrayal of a gay relationship between Jack and Frame, and I think it's a wonderful thing that the new series has done to have that LGBT representation in it. In a number of ways. I think it hasn't been always as good as it's wanted it to be, and we've had that discussion before, particularly in the Chibnall era, but that moment, to have such a powerful moment between two men, and have it mean what it does, you know, where the Doctor's forgiving Jack for that wonderful dramatic moment at the end of Children of Earth, which I just think is amazing. That tiny few seconds was worth making the runner-up list for me.
His name's Alonzo.
That's right, yeah. It just go ahead and live your life, Jack. You're allowed to fall in love again. Yeah, it's just wonderful.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, Dave, I've got just a few quick closing remarks before I do some stuff for me that didn't get in. I'm not sure if you have a similar list. Capaldi's Pity, no stars. I hope there'd be stars. It just didn't get into my list, but I love it.
But it was on mine, so there you go.
Yeah, The Doctor's Wife, which I think is marvellous. Ditto for Amy's Choice and The Girl Who Waited, which are both weird because I don't like Amy, but I love Amy's Choice and The Girl Who Waited, which are both extremely Amy-centric stories. I had nothing from the Chibnall era, although you did have one. Murray Gold, or music in general, I didn't get into. Any of the companions, you got Bill, though, that's great. Or any behind-the-scenes people. They're some of the notes I made of stuff that didn't get into my lists.
Yeah, I didn't have a runner-up list, but if I did, I think I'll start digging a bit deeper and start looking at some of those directors particularly that have done a really good job. But no, I'm very happy with the stuff that we've discussed. I think we've really pulled out some pretty wonderful stuff about the new series that, as you say, it's never going to quite mean what the classic one did to us because it wasn't a part of our childhood, and that's just a reality, and that's fine. But when you stop and think about it, there's a lot of amazing stuff in it, and I think we've really represented that tonight.
Yeah, and I think my closing remark, Dave, would be I was really surprised when I was making this list. In fact, I commented a couple of times on Twitter about it. And the first thing that surprised me was how often I was going to De Feels for my top moments. All these moments that made me sad and shed a tear, or maybe so happy that I shed a tear. And I think that's so tied into New Who. You can't think of big moments in New Who and not have some swell of music or some big speech, or probably both, on your mind ahead of other things. You know, New Who is all about De Feels, as the kids say. The second thing, I guess, that surprised me, and it shouldn't have been a surprise, is just how many moments I liked. I mean, I made this top 5. I had my 3 runners-up. I had a bunch of other stuff I've just rattled through that didn't make the list at all. Just so many great moments in New Who, Dave. It really is a treasure. Look,
absolutely. And I think that's why I've cheated in part by having representative examples, you know, rather than picking one or, you know, picking one two-parter that represents a whole bunch of two-parters I love. Picking one Dalek story that represents a whole bunch of Dalek stories I love. And that was sort of the only way I could fit anything into a list as short as 5 items.
Yeah, it really was cruel in some way. I mean, I had my top 5, had my runners-up, and there's probably listeners out there thinking, Christ, Rob, what about X, Y, and Z? And trust me, I know X, Y, and Z too. I love them as well. But the nature of this exercise was just to whittle it down to the point where you're throwing out stuff you absolutely adore. It's cruel.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward, as I always do, to what examples our listeners come back to us with by email and by social media.